In the grand halls of Rosewood Palace, where centuries of tradition echoed through marble corridors, two young voices broke through the formal silence with pure, unfiltered joy. 8-year-old Prince Alexander and 6-year-old Princess Isabella had discovered that the most magical adventures weren't found in fairy tales, but in the simple moments when royal duties melted away and childhood took center stage. Today, their laughter would transform the palace gardens into a wonderland where balloons danced with the wind, beloved pets became loyal companions, and two young royals learned that happiness doesn't require a crown. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the perfectly manicured lawns of Rosewood Palace as Prince Alexander pressed his nose against the tall windows of the breakfast room. His breath created small clouds of fog on the glass, while he watched the gardeners preparing something extraordinary in the distance. Colorful shapes bobbed and swayed in the gentle breeze, catching the early light like captured rainbows. "Isabella, come look at this," he called to his younger sister, who was carefully arranging her toast into the shape of a castle on her plate. The princess, with her auburn curls still slightly messy from sleep, abandoned her breakfast creation and rushed to join her brother at the window. "Oh my goodness, Alexander, are those balloons?" Her green eyes widened with wonder as she counted the dozens of colorful orbs floating throughout the garden. Red ones clustered near the rose beds, blue ones danced above the fountain, and silver ones caught the sunlight like fallen stars. Their governess, Miss Caroline, approached with a knowing smile. She had been caring for the royal children since Alexander was born, and she understood their need for joy amidst the structured world of palace life. "Your parents have planned something special for today," she explained gently. "It's a celebration day, just for you two." Alexander's dark hair fell across his forehead as he leaned closer to the window. "But why? It's not our birthdays, and Christmas was months ago." Miss Caroline's eyes twinkled with the secret she had been trusted to keep. Sometimes the best celebrations are the ones that happen just because someone loves you very much. The children exchanged excited glances. In their young lives filled with lessons about history, languages, and royal protocol, unexpected celebrations were rare treasures. Princess Isabella bounced on her toes, her morning dress rustling with the movement. "Can we go outside now? Please, Miss Caroline." "After you finish your breakfast properly," Miss Caroline replied, though her tone held no real strictness. She had learned that the children's appetites improved dramatically when adventure awaited them. As they hurried through their meal, the palace came alive around them. Staff members moved with purposeful energy, carrying mysterious packages and whispering among themselves. Cook's assistant hurried past the dining room window with a tray of what looked like tiny sandwiches cut into star shapes. The head groundskeeper gestured animatedly to his team as they positioned colorful cushions around the garden. Alexander noticed his younger sister's leg bouncing under the table as she tried to eat her porridge quickly without spilling. "Isabella, you're making the whole table shake," he teased gently. "I can't help it. I'm too excited," she replied, taking another careful spoonful. "Do you think Mama and Papa will be there too?" Miss Caroline nodded as she supervised their morning meal. "Their Majesties will join you once their morning meetings conclude. They wouldn't miss seeing your faces when you discover what's waiting outside." The anticipation in the breakfast room was almost tangible. Even Winston, Alexander's beloved golden retriever, seemed to sense the excitement. The dog had positioned himself by the door leading to the garden, his tail wagging slowly as he watched the unusual activity outside. Occasionally, he would let out a small whine of curiosity. Princess Isabella finished her last bite of toast and looked hopefully at Miss Caroline. "Is that enough breakfast? I promise I'll eat a big lunch later." Alexander had already cleaned his plate, though his eyes never left the garden view. Through the window, he could see more staff members arranging something near the old oak tree where he and Isabella often climbed during their free time. "Very well," Miss Caroline conceded, unable to hide her own excitement. "But first, let's make sure you're properly dressed for garden adventures." The children rushed upstairs to their rooms, with Miss Caroline following at a more dignified pace. In Alexander's room, she helped him choose comfortable clothes suitable for outdoor play while maintaining royal appearance. A simple white shirt, navy trousers, and sturdy shoes that could handle grass stains, and adventure. Isabella's preparation took slightly longer, as she insisted on wearing her favorite dress with tiny flowers embroidered around the collar. "It matches the garden," she explained seriously, as if this was the most logical reason in the world. As Miss Caroline brushed Isabella's curls into a neat but playful style, the princess chattered excitedly about what they might find outside. "Do you think there will be enough balloons for us to each hold one? What if they're filled with helium and they carry us up to the clouds?" "I don't think your parents would appreciate finding their children floating above the palace towers," Miss Caroline replied with amusement. "But I suspect there will be quite enough balloons for whatever adventures you have in mind." Alexander appeared in his sister's doorway, having dressed himself with the independence he had been developing lately. At 8, he was beginning to understand his role as the older sibling, often looking out for Isabella while sharing in her wonder at the world. "Are you ready for our adventure, Princess Isabella?" he asked formally, offering his arm in the way he had been taught for royal occasions. Isabella giggled and took his arm with exaggerated dignity. "I am ready, Prince Alexander. Let's proceed to our royal garden adventure." Miss Caroline followed behind them as they walked through the palace corridors with as much restraint as two excited children could manage. Portraits of their ancestors seemed to smile down at them from the walls, as if approving of the joy that filled the usually quiet halls. As they approached the garden doors, they could hear sounds that were definitely not part of the usual palace routine. There was laughter from the staff, the gentle sound of balloons bumping together in the breeze, and what sounded suspiciously like their father's deep chuckle. Alexander reached for the door handle, then paused and looked at his sister. "Whatever we find out there, let's promise to remember every detail so we can tell stories about it when we're grown up." Isabella nodded solemnly, understanding in her 6-year-old way that this moment was special. "I promise. And let's promise to have the most fun we've ever had." With that agreement between them, Alexander opened the door, and both children stepped into a world transformed by love, imagination, and the simple magic of balloons dancing in the morning breeze. Their adventure was about to begin, and the palace gardens would never look quite the same to them again. Part 2, the garden doors swung open to reveal a wonderland that exceeded even Isabella's vivid imagination. Hundreds of balloons in every color imaginable filled the space like a three-dimensional rainbow. Some were tied to garden benches, others floated freely in clusters, and still others were woven through the branches of trees, creating natural archways of color and joy. "Oh!" Isabella gasped, her small hand flying to cover her mouth in amazement. Alexander stood beside her, momentarily speechless as he took in the transformation of their familiar garden into something from a dream. Their parents, King William and Queen Catherine, emerged from behind a particularly large cluster of golden balloons near the fountain. Both were dressed more casually than usual, clearly prepared to join their children's adventure rather than simply observe it. "Surprise!" Queen Catherine called out, her arms spread wide to encompass the magical scene. Her usual formal composure had given way to the warm, playful mother her children knew best. King William approached with a grin that made him look years younger. "We thought our favorite prince and princess deserved a day where the only royal duty was to have as much fun as possible." Isabella broke free from Alexander's arm and ran toward her parents, her dress flowing behind her like a flower petal caught in the wind. "Mama, Papa, it's like someone caught all the colors from a rainbow and brought them to our garden." Alexander followed more slowly, his 8-year-old sense of dignity warring with his excitement. As he reached his family, his reserve finally crumbled. "This is incredible. How'd you arrange all of this?" Queen Catherine knelt down to Isabella's level, while King William ruffled Alexander's hair affectionately. "Sometimes parents need reminders that childhood is meant to be filled with magic," the Queen explained. "Yesterday, I realized we hadn't heard you two truly laugh in far too long." As if summoned by the mention of laughter, Winston came bounding around the corner, his golden fur gleaming in the sunlight. Someone had tied a cluster of small balloons to his collar, and he looked both dignified and ridiculous as he trotted toward the family. The sight sent Isabella into delighted giggles. Winston looks like he's ready to fly away, she exclaimed, reaching out to pet the patient dog, who was clearly enjoying the unusual attention. Behind Winston came Duchess, Isabella's tabby cat, who had been somewhat less cooperative about balloon decoration. She wore a single blue balloon tied with a silk ribbon around her neck, and her expression suggested she tolerated this indignity only because it pleased her young mistress. Even our pets are part of the celebration, Alexander observed, gently scratching behind Duchess's ears. The cat purred despite her dignified disapproval of the festive accessory. King William gestured toward the various activity stations that had been set up throughout the garden. We have balloon games by the rose garden, a treasure hunt among the hedges, and Cook has prepared a picnic that we can enjoy wherever looks most appealing. Queen Catherine stood and took both children's hands. But before we begin our adventures, there's one more surprise. She led them toward the old oak tree where a large wicker basket sat waiting. Inside the basket, cushioned by soft blankets, were two tiny bundles of fur that made Isabella squeal with delight. Puppies. Alexander breathed, his composure finally abandoning him completely. Are they for us? Two golden retriever puppies, clearly Winston's offspring, wiggled and yapped softly in their basket. One wore a tiny red collar, the other a blue one, and both looked up at the children with bright, curious eyes. Winston became a father 6 weeks ago, King William explained. We thought it was time you each had a companion of your own to grow up with. Isabella was practically vibrating with excitement. Can I hold one, please? I promise to be gentle. Queen Catherine helped her daughter carefully lift the puppy with the blue collar. The tiny creature immediately settled into Isabella's arms as if it belonged there, its small tail wagging against her dress. Alexander reached for the red-collared puppy with the careful movements he had learned from years of handling Winston. As soon as the puppy was secure in his arms, it began trying to lick his face, sending the usually composed prince into fits of laughter. They'll need names, Queen Catherine observed, settling onto one of the blankets that had been spread beneath the oak tree. Mine shall be called Buttercup, Isabella declared immediately, holding her puppy up to examine its sweet face. Because she's golden like butter, and she makes me as happy as flowers. Alexander considered his choice more carefully, studying his puppy's markings and personality. The little dog seemed brave and curious, unafraid of the new surroundings and eager to explore. I think I'll call him Scout, he finally decided. He looks like an adventurer. King William settled beside his family on the blanket, reaching over to pet both puppies. Excellent choices. Scout and Buttercup will need to learn palace etiquette, just like you two did. This suggestion sent both children into giggles as they imagined their tiny puppies learning to bow properly or sit still during formal dinners. Miss Caroline approached with a tray of the star-shaped sandwiches they had seen earlier, along with fresh fruit and small cakes decorated with balloon designs. Shall we begin our celebration feast? She suggested. As the family settled in for their impromptu picnic, the balloons continued to dance overhead, creating shifting patterns of shadow and light on the blanket below. Winston lay nearby, seeming proud of his offspring and content to watch over the expanded family group. Isabella fed tiny pieces of her sandwich to Buttercup, who accepted each morsel with great seriousness. Mama, can Buttercup sleep in my room tonight? We'll need to prepare proper beds for both puppies first, Queen Catherine replied. But I think they would enjoy being close to their new families. Alexander held Scout up to see the balloons floating above them. The puppy's ears perked up with interest, and he made small sounds as if trying to communicate with the colorful orbs. I think he wants to play with the balloons, Alexander observed. King William reached for a low-floating cluster of balloons and gently pulled them down within the puppy's reach. Both Scout and Buttercup were immediately fascinated, pawing gently at the strange, bouncing objects. The afternoon's sun climbed higher, warming the garden and creating the perfect atmosphere for their celebration. Other members of the palace staff occasionally passed by, all smiling at the sight of their royal family relaxed and playing like any ordinary family might on a beautiful day. This is the best day ever, Isabella announced, lying back on the blanket with Buttercup curled up on her chest. Above them, balloons swayed gently in the breeze, and she imagined they were dancing just for her. Alexander, still sitting up with Scout in his lap, nodded in agreement. I wish every day could be like this. Queen Catherine exchanged a meaningful look with King William. Both parents understood that these moments of pure childhood joy were precious beyond measure, especially for children who would one day carry the weight of royal responsibility. Who says they can't be? King William asked gently. Perhaps we've been taking royal duties a bit too seriously lately. And, with that suggestion hanging in the air like the colorful balloons around them, the royal family continued their celebration, surrounded by love, laughter, and the simple magic of a perfect day. Part 3. After their delightful picnic, Queen Catherine suggested they explore the balloon treasure hunt that had been prepared throughout the garden's winding paths. Staff members had hidden small treasures beneath specific color balloons, and golden ribbons tied to certain balloon clusters would lead the children on an adventure through their familiar surroundings transformed into an enchanted landscape. Isabella carried Buttercup while Alexander kept Scout tucked securely in his arms as they began their quest. Winston trotted alongside them, his own balloons bobbing with each step, while Duchess followed at a more dignified pace, clearly resigned to her festive decoration. Look for the golden ribbons, King William reminded them, pointing toward the hedge maze where several balloon clusters swayed invitingly. Each one marks a special discovery. The first golden ribbon led them to the rose garden, where pink and white balloons had been woven through the climbing roses, creating living bouquets that seemed to bloom with color and light. Beneath a particularly large cluster of white balloons, Isabella discovered a small wooden box painted with flowers. "What's inside?" Alexander asked, leaning over his sister's shoulder as she carefully opened the box. Inside were 2 small golden compasses, each engraved with their initials. Isabella's compass bore a tiny flower design around the edges, while Alexander's featured a miniature crown. "These are very special compasses," Queen Catherine explained as she helped the children examine their treasures. "They're not just for finding direction when you're exploring. They're for finding your way when you need to remember who you are and what's important." Isabella held her compass up to catch the sunlight. "Will it always point toward home?" "It will always point toward your true north," King William replied, "which might be home, or it might be toward kindness, or courage, or the people you love most." Alexander studied his compass thoughtfully. At 8, he was beginning to understand that his parents often gave him gifts that carried deeper meanings. So if we ever get lost, we can find our way back to what matters. "Exactly," Queen Catherine confirmed, kissing the top of his head. Scout wiggled in Alexander's arms, apparently eager to continue their adventure. The puppy's enthusiasm made Alexander laugh, and they followed the next golden ribbon toward the fountain area, where blue and silver balloons created an aquatic wonderland. Here, they found the second treasure, matching leather journals with their names embossed in gold lettering. The journals were small enough to carry on adventures, but substantial enough to hold many stories. "For recording your adventures," Miss Caroline explained, appearing beside them with a fond smile. "Every good explorer needs a place to write down their discoveries." Isabella opened her journal and ran her fingers over the blank pages. "I'm going to write about today, and about Buttercup and all the balloons, and how happy everything is." Alexander nodded approvingly. "I'll write about Scout, and about how the garden looks different when it's full of magic." The third golden ribbon led them deeper into the garden, toward the old greenhouse where their grandmother used to grow her prize orchids. The path was lined with yellow and orange balloons, creating a sunny corridor that felt warm and welcoming even in the shade of the large oak trees. Inside the greenhouse, which had been cleaned and prepared for their treasure hunt, they discovered easels set up with canvases and paints. Balloons had been arranged to create inspirational scenes throughout the space, and natural light filtered through the glass walls, creating perfect conditions for artistic creation. "Art supplies," Isabella exclaimed, immediately drawn to the bright watercolor paints arranged on small tables beside each easel. "We thought you might enjoy capturing some of today's magic in pictures," Queen Catherine said. "You can paint the balloons, or your new puppies, or anything that makes you happy." Alexander set Scout down carefully in a small pen that had been prepared for the puppies, complete with soft blankets and toys. Both Scout and Buttercup seemed content to play together in their safe space while their new families explored. Isabella immediately began painting what she described as Buttercup flying with the balloons. Her technique was enthusiastic rather than precise, but her joy was evident in every brushstroke. Bright yellows and blues swirled across her canvas, creating an impressionistic celebration of color and movement. Alexander approached his painting more methodically, carefully mixing colors to match the exact shade of the balloons he had observed. He painted the view from their breakfast room window, showing the garden transformed by the balloon celebration, with tiny figures representing his family gathered beneath the oak tree. King William and Queen Catherine set up their own easels, and soon the entire family was absorbed in creative expression. The greenhouse, filled with quiet concentration, broken by occasional comments about color choices or requests for assistance with difficult techniques. "Mama, how do I make the balloons look like they're floating?" Isabella asked, studying her canvas with a slight frown. Queen Catherine showed her daughter how to use lighter brushstrokes and white paint to create the illusion of lightness and movement. "Art is like magic," she explained. "You use what you see and feel to create something new." As they painted, the afternoon progressed peacefully. Staff members occasionally checked on them, refilling water containers and admiring the family's artistic efforts. Winston found a comfortable spot near the greenhouse entrance where he could watch over everyone while enjoying the warm sunshine streaming through the glass. Alexander finished his painting and stepped back to examine it critically. "I want to add the puppies," he decided, "but they're so small in the picture, I'm not sure how to make them look right." King William joined his son at the easel, studying the painting with genuine admiration. "Sometimes the most important things in a picture are the smallest ones," he observed. "What if you use just a tiny dot of gold paint for each puppy? Then people looking at your painting will have to look carefully to find them, just like we had to look carefully to find all the special moments in today." This suggestion delighted Alexander, who carefully added 2 small golden dots beneath the painted oak tree. The effect was subtle but meaningful, representing the newest additions to their family celebration. Isabella declared her painting finished with a flourish of her brush. "It's perfect," she announced. "It shows exactly how happy I feel inside." Looking at her daughter's exuberant creation, Queen Catherine had to agree. The painting captured something essential about Isabella's joyful spirit and her ability to find magic in ordinary moments. As they cleaned their brushes and admired their finished artwork, the late afternoon sun began casting longer shadows through the greenhouse windows. The balloons outside continued their gentle dance, and the sound of the puppies playing created a peaceful backdrop to their creative endeavors. "Can we hang our paintings in our rooms?" Alexander asked, carefully carrying his canvas to where it could dry safely. "Of course," King William replied. "Art should be shared and enjoyed, especially when it captures memories as special as today's." As they prepared to leave the greenhouse, Isabella turned back to look at the space one more time. "Will we remember this day forever?" she asked. Queen Catherine knelt down beside her daughter. "We'll remember in our hearts, and now we'll also remember in our paintings and in our journals and in the stories we tell about the day when balloons filled our garden and 2 special puppies joined our family." With their treasures gathered and their artistic creations safely stored, the royal family prepared for the final phase of their balloon celebration, knowing that the magic of this day would remain with them long after the last balloon had drifted away on the evening breeze. Part 4. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades that complemented the balloon-filled garden, the royal family gathered once again beneath the oak tree for the culmination of their celebration. The puppies had grown sleepy from their afternoon of play and were content to curl up in their basket, occasionally opening curious eyes to watch the ongoing festivities. King William had arranged for one final surprise, and as the family settled on their blankets, palace staff members appeared carrying what looked like larger, more elaborate balloons than those already decorating the garden. "These are very special balloons," Queen Catherine explained as the children examined the newcomers with interest. "They're called sky lanterns, and when the sun sets, we can light them and watch them carry our wishes up to the stars." Isabella clapped her hands together in delight. Like sending letters to heaven. Something like that, King William confirmed. People have been using sky lanterns for thousands of years to celebrate special occasions and share their hopes with the universe. Alexander studied the paper lanterns with the analytical mind that would serve him well in his future role. How do they work? What makes them fly? Miss Caroline, who had been helping to prepare the lanterns, showed him the small fuel cell at the bottom of each lantern. When we light this, the hot air rises inside the paper balloon and lifts it up into the sky. It's the same principle that makes hot air balloons work. As they waited for the perfect moment to launch their sky lanterns, the family spent time reflecting on their extraordinary day. Isabella had retrieved her new journal and was attempting to write down her memories, though her 6-year-old handwriting required considerable concentration. "Dear Journal," she dictated to herself as she carefully formed each letter. "Today was the most magical day ever. We got puppies and balloons and painted pictures and ate star sandwiches. Buttercup is the best puppy in the world, and she likes to lick my nose." Alexander was also writing in his journal, but his approach was more systematic. He was creating a detailed record of the day's events, including descriptions of the balloon arrangements, the treasure hunt clues, and his observations about Scout's personality and behavior. "I want to remember everything," he explained when his mother asked about his serious expression. "Someday, when I'm grown up and have responsibilities, I want to be able to read this and remember how it felt to be 8 years old and completely happy." Queen Catherine felt her heart swell with love and pride for her thoughtful son. "That's very wise, Alexander. Happy memories are treasures we carry with us always." As the sun continued its descent, the garden began to take on the magical quality that comes with twilight. The balloons, which had been bright and cheerful in the afternoon sun, now glowed softly in the gentler light. Palace staff began lighting lanterns along the garden paths, creating a fairy tale atmosphere that made even the familiar surroundings seem enchanted. Winston, who had been a patient and dignified participant in the day's festivities, finally surrendered to the temptation of the balloons. He began gently jumping toward a low-hanging cluster, his tail wagging with playful energy. His antics delighted the children, who encouraged him with laughter and applause. "Even Winston is having the best day ever," Isabella observed, giggling as the golden retriever managed to tap a balloon with his nose, sending it bouncing away from him. Duchess, meanwhile, had found a comfortable perch on one of the garden benches where she could observe the proceedings with feline dignity while staying well away from the chaos of balloons and excited puppies. As the sky deepened from blue to purple, with the first stars beginning to appear, King William announced that it was time to prepare their sky lanterns. Each family member was given a lantern to personalize with wishes or drawings before the launch. Isabella chose to decorate her lantern with pictures of Buttercup, using colored markers to create a somewhat abstract but enthusiastic portrait of her new companion. Alexander opted for a more symbolic approach, drawing a compass rose on his lantern to represent the guidance and direction he had learned about that day. Queen Catherine and King William wrote messages on their lanterns, though they kept the contents private, sharing meaningful glances that spoke of parental hopes and dreams for their children's futures. "What should we wish for?" Isabella asked as they prepared to light the lanterns. "Wishes are very personal," Queen Catherine replied gently. "But the best wishes are usually about love, happiness, and hope for good things to come." Alexander considered this seriously. "I'm going to wish that Scout and Buttercup will be healthy and happy, and that our family will always find time for days like today." Isabella nodded approvingly. "I'm going to wish that every day could have at least a little bit of magic in it, and that Buttercup will love me forever." As the first stars became clearly visible in the darkening sky, the family gathered in a circle around their prepared lanterns. Palace staff members stood ready to assist with the lighting, but this final ceremony belonged entirely to the royal family. One by one, they lit their sky lanterns and watched as the warm air filled the paper balloons, causing them to strain upward against the gentle hands that held them. The lanterns glowed like giant fireflies, casting soft light on the faces of their creators. "On the count of 3, we'll release them together," King William instructed. 1, 2, 3. For sky lanterns rose into the twilight, carrying their wishes and dreams up toward the stars. The family stood together, watching as their lanterns joined the vast expanse of the evening sky, growing smaller and smaller until they looked like new stars that had just decided to join the constellation. Isabella slipped her hand into her mother's, while Alexander stood close to his father, all of them united in the magic of the moment. Around them, the garden balloons continued their gentle dance. The puppies slept peacefully in their basket, and the familiar surroundings of Rosewood Palace seemed transformed into a place where any dream might come true. "This is what happiness looks like," Isabella whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of the perfect evening. And as their sky lanterns disappeared into the star-filled darkness, carrying with them the love, hopes, and dreams of a royal family who had discovered that the greatest treasures in life were the moments they shared together. The children knew they had experienced something they would carry in their hearts forever. Part 5. As the last traces of their sky lanterns disappeared into the star-filled night, the royal family remained in the garden, reluctant to bring their magical day to an end. The balloon-decorated space had taken on an entirely different character in the evening light, with shadows and gentle illumination creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and infinite. Isabella had retrieved Buttercup from the puppy basket and was cuddled on the blanket with her new companion, both of them drowsy from the excitement and fresh air of their adventure. Alexander sat nearby, with Scout curled in his lap, the puppy's small body rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of sleep. "I don't want today to end," Isabella murmured, her voice carrying the sleepy contentment of a child who has experienced perfect happiness. Queen Catherine smoothed her daughter's hair gently. "The wonderful thing about days like today is that they never really end. They become part of who we are, and we carry them with us always." King William, who had been quietly observing his family with deep satisfaction, spoke thoughtfully. "When I was about your age, Alexander, my own father arranged a similar surprise for me. I had been struggling with the weight of knowing that someday I would be king, feeling overwhelmed by all the rules and responsibilities." Alexander looked up with interest. "What kind of surprise?" "He filled the entire great hall with kites," King William recalled with a smile. "Hundreds of them, all different colors and sizes, hanging from the ceiling like a sky full of flying dreams. He told me that being a good king meant never forgetting how to see wonder in the world." Isabella sat up straighter, fascinated by this glimpse into her father's childhood. "Did you get a flight of kites?" "We spent 3 days flying them from the castle towers," King William confirmed. "And I learned that leadership isn't about being serious all the time. Sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is remember how to laugh and play and see magic in ordinary moments." Alexander absorbed this lesson with the gravity that characterized his approach to important information. So today wasn't just about having fun, it was about learning something too. Queen Catherine joined the conversation. "The most important lessons often come disguised as fun. Today you learned about joy, creativity, responsibility for your new pets, and the value of family time. These aren't small things, Alexander. They're the foundations of wisdom." As if to demonstrate the ongoing nature of their learning experience, Scout chose that moment to wake up and begin exploring his new surroundings with typical puppy curiosity. Alexander carefully supervised his pet's investigation of the garden, gently redirecting him when he showed too much interest in the lower-hanging balloons. "Puppies are a big responsibility," Alexander observed, unconsciously echoing lessons he had heard about leadership. "Scout depends on me to keep him safe and teach him how to behave properly. Just like someday, people will depend on you to help keep them safe and make good decisions," King William agreed. "But the skills you learn taking care of Scout, patience, kindness, consistency, and love, those are exactly the same skills that make a good leader." Isabella was having her own learning experience with Buttercup, who had woken up and was attempting to chew on the ribbon from a nearby balloon. "Buttercup, no," she said firmly but gently, offering the puppy a proper toy instead. "You have to learn the difference between what's for playing and what's just for looking at." Miss Caroline, who had been quietly cleaning up the art supplies from their afternoon painting session, approached with warm blankets for the family. "The evening is getting cooler," she observed. "Perhaps we should move our celebration indoors soon." But none of the family seemed ready to leave their balloon wonderland just yet. King William accepted a blanket and spread it over his legs, creating a cozy nest where both children could snuggle while still keeping their puppies close. "Tell us about the balloons," Isabella requested. "Where do they come from? Who decided that balloons should be so happy?" Queen Catherine settled more comfortably on the blanket and began to share what she knew about the history of balloons and celebrations. "People have been creating flying decorations for thousands of years," she began. "In ancient China, they made lanterns that could float. In other cultures, people decorated with colorful fabrics that moved in the wind." Alexander listened intently, his curious mind always eager for new information. "So balloons are like a very old tradition of celebrating with things that move and dance in the air?" "Exactly," Queen Catherine confirmed. "There's something about watching colorful objects float and dance that makes people happy, no matter where they're from or when they lived." As they talked, palace staff began the careful process of collecting some of the balloons for storage, though they left many in place to extend the magical atmosphere for a few more days. The children watched this process with interest, understanding that even the most wonderful celebrations eventually need to be carefully preserved and treasured. "Will some of the balloons stay up overnight?" Isabella asked hopefully. "Many of them will," King William assured her. "And tomorrow we can continue enjoying them while we introduce Scout and Buttercup to their new home and routine." The mention of tomorrow sparked a discussion about the practical aspects of pet ownership. The children needed to understand feeding schedules, house training, exercise requirements, and all the daily responsibilities that came with their wonderful new companions. "We'll need to puppy-proof your rooms," Miss Caroline mentioned practically, "and establish routines for feeding and walking and training." Alexander nodded seriously. "I want to do everything right for Scout. I want him to be the happiest, best-behaved dog in the kingdom. And I want Buttercup to love living at the palace," Isabella added. "I want her to feel like she belongs here with us." As the evening progressed, the royal family continued their conversation about responsibility, joy, tradition, and the importance of making time for magic in everyday life. The balloons swayed gently around them, a constant reminder of the day's celebration and the love that had inspired it. When they finally gathered their belongings and prepared to head inside, both children carried their sleeping puppies carefully, understanding that they were now responsible for these precious lives. Their journals and new compasses were tucked securely under their arms, tangible reminders of the lessons and memories they had gathered. As they walked toward the palace, Isabella turned back for one last look at their balloon-filled garden. "Thank you for the most perfect day ever," she said to her parents. "I'll remember it always and always." Alexander echoed his sister's sentiment, adding, "And thank you for teaching us that being royal doesn't mean we can't have fun and be silly and laugh until our stomachs hurt." King William and Queen Catherine exchanged a look of deep satisfaction and love. They had succeeded in giving their children something far more valuable than any formal lesson or official ceremony. They had given them the understanding that joy and responsibility could coexist, that leadership and laughter were not opposites, and that the most important treasures in life were the moments of pure happiness shared with people you love. As the palace doors closed behind them, the balloon-filled garden remained as a testament to the power of love, creativity, and the simple magic that exists when families take time to celebrate the wonder of being together. The balloons would eventually be taken down, the puppies would grow into dogs, and the children would grow into their royal roles, but the memory of this perfect day would remain forever in their hearts. A reminder that happiness, like balloons in the wind, is meant to be shared, celebrated, and treasured always. After their delightful picnic beneath the oak tree, Queen Catherine suggested they explore the balloon treasure hunt that had been carefully prepared throughout the garden's winding paths. Palace staff members had spent hours hiding small treasures beneath specific colored balloons, and shimmering golden ribbons tied to certain balloon clusters would lead the children on an adventure through their familiar surroundings. now transformed into an enchanted landscape that seemed borrowed from their favorite fairy tales. Isabella carried Buttercup, while Alexander kept Scout tucked securely in his arms as they began their magical quest. The puppies seemed to sense the excitement in the air, their bright eyes taking in all the colorful sights around them. Winston trotted alongside the family group, his own festive balloons bobbing cheerfully with each step, while Duchess followed at a more dignified pace, clearly resigned to her blue silk ribbon and single balloon, but determined to maintain her feline composure throughout the celebration. "Remember to look for the golden ribbons," King William reminded them, his voice carrying the same excitement that sparkled in his children's eyes. He pointed toward the elaborate hedge maze where several balloon clusters swayed invitingly in the gentle afternoon breeze. "Each one marks a very special discovery that we've prepared just for you." The first golden ribbon they discovered led them toward the rose garden, where someone had spent considerable time weaving pink and white balloons through the climbing roses that covered the ornate trellises. The effect was breathtaking, living bouquets that seemed to bloom with both natural beauty and artificial color, creating a display that blended reality and imagination in the most delightful way possible. Beneath a particularly impressive cluster of pristine white balloons, Isabella discovered a small wooden box that had been painted with delicate flowers and shades that perfectly matched her favorite dress. Her small fingers traced the careful brushwork as she examined the gift. "What do you think is inside?" Alexander asked, leaning over his sister's shoulder with genuine curiosity. Scout wiggled in his arms, apparently eager to investigate this new discovery as well. Isabella carefully lifted the lid of the wooden box, revealing two small golden compasses nestled in soft velvet. Each compass had been lovingly engraved with their individual initials, but the decorative details made them uniquely personal. Isabella's compass bore a tiny flower design around the edges, with petals that caught the sunlight like captured dewdrops. Alexander's featured a miniature crown that spoke to his future role, but also included small symbols of adventure: a ship, a mountain, and a star. "These are very special compasses," Queen Catherine explained as she knelt down to help the children examine their treasures more closely. Her voice carried a warmth that suggested these gifts held deeper meaning than simple navigation tools. They're not just for finding direction when you're exploring new places. They're for finding your way when you need to remember who you are and what's truly important in life. Isabella held her compass up to catch the dancing sunlight that filtered through the balloon-decorated rose arbor. The golden surface gleamed brilliantly, and she watched in fascination as the needle steadied and pointed in its chosen direction. "Will it always point toward home?" she asked, her 6-year-old mind grappling with concepts that seemed both simple and profound. King William's expression grew thoughtful as he considered how to explain such an important concept to his young children. "It will always point toward your true north," he replied carefully, "which might be home when you're lost in unfamiliar places, or it might point toward kindness when you're not sure how to treat someone, or toward courage when you're feeling afraid, or toward the people you love most when you need to remember what really matters." Alexander studied his compass with the analytical mind that his tutors had been nurturing since he was very small. Even at 8 years old, he was beginning to understand that his parents often gave them gifts that carried deeper meanings, lessons disguised as presents that would serve them well throughout their lives. So if we ever get lost, not just in a place, but in knowing what to do, we can use these to find our way back to what matters most. "Exactly," Queen Catherine confirmed, leaning over to kiss the top of his dark hair. "Wisdom isn't about always knowing the right answer immediately. It's about knowing how to find your way to the right answer, even when the path isn't clear." As if he understood that this was a moment for adventure rather than philosophy, Scout began to wiggle more insistently in Alexander's arms, apparently eager to continue their treasure hunt. The puppy's enthusiasm made Alexander laugh, a sound that seemed to encourage all the adults around them to remember that this was, above all, a day for joy and discovery. They followed the next golden ribbon toward the fountain area, where an entirely different scene awaited them. Blue and silver balloons had been arranged to create what looked like an aquatic wonderland. The balloons clustered around the fountain's multiple tiers, and some had been weighted to float just above the water's surface, creating the illusion that they were somehow part of the fountain's display. The afternoon sun caught both the water droplets and the metallic balloon surfaces, creating tiny rainbows that danced and shifted with every breath of wind. Here, they found a second treasure of their hunt, matching leather journals bound with silk ribbons and embossed with their names in elegant gold lettering. The journals were small enough to carry on future adventures, but substantial enough to hold many stories, dreams, and observations. The leather was soft and supple, clearly crafted by master artisans, and the pages inside were thick and inviting, practically begging to be filled with words and pictures. "These are for recording your adventures," Miss Caroline explained, appearing beside them with the fond smile that always accompanied her observations of the children's joy. She had been caring for royal children long enough to understand the importance of preserving childhood memories. Every good explorer needs a place to write down their discoveries, their thoughts, and their dreams. Isabella opened her journal with reverent care and ran her small fingers over the blank pages. Each page seemed to hold infinite possibilities, like windows waiting to display whatever experiences and imagination might fill them. "I'm going to write about today," she declared with the certainty that characterized her approach to everything that excited her. "And about Buttercup, and all the beautiful balloons, and how happy everything feels today." Alexander nodded approvingly as he examined his own journal, already thinking about how he might organize his thoughts and observations. "I'll write about Scout, and about how the garden looks completely different when it's filled with magic, and about what it felt like to watch our sky lanterns disappear into the stars." The third golden ribbon led them deeper into the garden's more secluded areas, toward the old greenhouse where their beloved grandmother had once grown her prize orchids. The path leading to this destination was lined with yellow and orange balloons, creating a sunny corridor that felt warm and welcoming even in the dappled shade cast by the large oak trees that had watched over the palace grounds for centuries. The greenhouse itself had been transformed into something extraordinary. Palace staff had spent days cleaning and preparing the space, polishing the glass walls until they sparkled like crystal, and arranging the interior to create perfect conditions for artistic inspiration. Easels had been set up with fresh canvases stretched and ready for creative expression. Balloons had been strategically arranged throughout the space to create inspirational scenes, and the natural light filtering through the glass walls had been enhanced with carefully positioned mirrors that created an almost magical illumination. "Art supplies," Isabella exclaimed, immediately drawn to the bright watercolor paints that had been arranged on small tables beside each easel. Her eyes widened as she took in a variety of brushes, the rainbow of paint tubes, and the clean water containers that sparkled like tiny crystal lakes. "We thought you might enjoy capturing some of today's magic in pictures," Queen Catherine explained, her own artistic background evident in her appreciation for the carefully prepared space. "You can paint the balloons or your new puppies or anything that makes you feel happy and inspired." Alexander carefully set Scout down in a specially prepared pen that palace staff had created just for this moment. The small enclosure was lined with soft blankets and filled with appropriate toys, ensuring that both puppies would be safe and comfortable while their new families explored their artistic sides. Scout and Buttercup seemed delighted with their temporary playground, immediately beginning to wrestle gently with rope toys and explore their cozy boundaries. Isabella approached her easel with the fearless enthusiasm that characterized her approach to all new experiences. She immediately began experimenting with the watercolors, creating what she described as Buttercup flying with the balloons through a sky made of happiness. Her technique was enthusiastic rather than precise, but her joy was evident in every bold brushstroke. Bright yellows representing Buttercup's golden fur swirled across her canvas, mixing with blues and whites that suggested clouds and sky, creating an impressionistic celebration of color, movement, and pure emotional expression. Alexander approached his artistic endeavor more methodically, a reflection of his naturally analytical personality. He spent several minutes studying the balloon arrangements visible through the greenhouse windows, carefully observing how the light affected different colors and how the gentle movement of the balloons created ever-changing compositions. He began by mixing colors on his palette, working to match the exact shades he had observed throughout their garden adventure. His painting depicted the view from their breakfast room window, showing the garden as it had appeared that morning when they first discovered the balloon transformation. He worked carefully to capture the sense of wonder and discovery that had marked the beginning of their adventure, including tiny figures representing his family gathered beneath the oak tree, and using perspective to show both the grand scope of the celebration and the intimate family moments that had made it special. King William and Queen Catherine set up their own easels nearby, understanding that participating alongside their children would make the experience more meaningful than simply supervising from a distance. Soon the entire family was absorbed in creative expression, the greenhouse filled with the comfortable quiet of concentration, broken only by occasional comments about color choices, requests for assistance with difficult techniques, or exclamations of delight over unexpected artistic discoveries. "Mama, how do I make the balloons look like they're actually floating instead of just sitting there?" Isabella asked, studying her canvas with a slight frown of concentration. She had captured the joy and color of her vision, but something about the static quality of her painted balloons wasn't matching the dynamic reality she wanted to represent. Queen Catherine moved to stand behind her daughter's easel, studying the painting with genuine appreciation for Isabella's creative vision. "Art is like magic," she explained gently, dipping a clean brush in white paint. "You use what you see and feel to create something new, but you also use techniques to make people feel what you felt." She showed Isabella how to use lighter brushstrokes and strategic touches of white paint to create the illusion of lightness and movement, demonstrating how highlights could suggest the play of sunlight on curved surfaces. As they painted, the afternoon progressed with a peacefulness that felt almost sacred. This was time removed from royal duties, from formal education, from the structured routines that usually governed their days. Palace staff members occasionally checked on their artistic family, refilling water containers and admiring the emerging paintings with genuine enthusiasm, but they maintained a respectful distance that allowed the family to exist in their creative bubble. Winston found a comfortable spot near the greenhouse entrance where he could stretch out in a patch of warm sunshine streaming through the glass. From this vantage point, he could watch over everyone while enjoying the warmth and the gentle sounds of artistic creation. His presence added to the sense of peaceful contentment that filled the space. Alexander finished the basic structure of his painting and stepped back to examine it with the critical eye he applied to all his endeavors. "I want to add Scout and Buttercup," he decided after careful consideration. "But they're so small in the picture compared to everything else, I'm not sure how to make them look right without making them seem out of proportion." King William joined his son at the easel, studying the painting with genuine admiration for Alexander's technical skill and attention to detail. The boy had inherited artistic ability along with his analytical mind, and his painting showed a sophisticated understanding of composition and perspective that impressed his father. "Sometimes the most important things in a picture are the smallest ones," he observed thoughtfully. "What if you use just a tiny dot of golden paint for each puppy? Then people looking at your painting will have to look carefully to find them, just like we had to look carefully today to find all the special moments that made this day magical." This suggestion delighted Alexander, who immediately understood the symbolic significance of making the puppies small, but precious details in his larger composition. He carefully mixed the perfect shade of gold and used the tip of his finest brush to add two small, perfectly placed dots beneath his painted oak tree. The effect was subtle but meaningful, representing the newest and most precious additions to their family celebration without overwhelming the composition. Isabella declared her painting finished with a dramatic flourish of her brush, holding it up for everyone to admire. "It's perfect," she announced with a confidence that came naturally to her. "It shows exactly how happy and excited and magical I feel inside when I think about today." Looking at her daughter's exuberant creation, Queen Catherine had to agree completely. While Isabella's technique was still developing, her painting captured something essential about her joyful spirit and her remarkable ability to find magic and wonder in ordinary moments. The swirling colors and bold brushstrokes conveyed emotion in a way that technical precision never could. As they cleaned their brushes and arranged their finished artwork where it could dry safely, the late afternoon sun began casting longer, more golden shadows through the greenhouse windows. The balloons outside continued their gentle dance in the breeze, and the peaceful sounds of Scout and Buttercup playing together created a perfect backdrop to their creative endeavors. "Can we hang our paintings in our rooms when they're dry?" Alexander asked, carefully positioning his canvas on the drying rack that had been provided for this purpose. "Of course," King William replied without hesitation. "Art should be shared and enjoyed, especially when it captures memories as special as today's. These paintings will remind you of this perfect day every time you look at them." As they prepared to leave the greenhouse and continue their adventure, Isabella turned back to look at the space one more time, as if trying to memorize every detail of their artistic sanctuary. "Will we remember this day forever and ever?" she asked, her voice carrying the weight of a child who understood that some moments were too precious to lose. Queen Catherine knelt down beside her daughter, taking her paint-stained hands in her own clean ones. "We'll remember it in our hearts, and now we'll also remember it in our paintings, and in our journals, and in the stories we tell about the day when balloons filled our garden and 2 wonderful puppies joined our family. The best memories are the ones we create together, and those last forever." With their artistic treasures safely stored and their creative spirits thoroughly satisfied, the royal family gathered their puppies and prepared for the next phase of their balloon celebration. The greenhouse adventure had added another layer of magic to their perfect day, proving that creativity and joy were just as important as any formal lesson they might learn in their structured education. The late afternoon sun was beginning to paint the sky in colors that would soon rival even their most vibrant balloons, and they knew that the most spectacular part of their celebration was yet to come. But first, they wanted to spend a few more minutes simply enjoying the peaceful aftermath of their artistic endeavors, surrounded by the gentle movement of balloons, the soft sounds of contented puppies, and the deep satisfaction that comes from creating something beautiful together as a family.